Me and Dylan this weekend got together to watch an event, and that event was the Conor McGregor Poirier round three fight. The series was 1-1. Conor had beat him early. It was early in Dustin's career, so I don't really know if you can say that it was that definitive. But either way, Connor beat him, and then we went to the second fight, which happened last year, and Poirier won pretty convincingly on that ground and pound kind of style of just mashing Connor when he was on the bottom. That happened. Then we go to this third fight, and everybody was excited for it because people were saying around the fight world, which I was buying into, was that Connor was different, that he was just in a different head, space, in a different entire, mindset than he was previously, where he'd lost those fights to Khabib and to Poirier before this. So there was a lot of hype going into the fight, of course, because it was like, okay, this is either Connor's making a comeback in the fighting world, or the Lafayette Diamond is actually the real deal and should deserve a title fight, and I would guess is the favorite to win it, kind of thing. So that was all happening, and that was all well and good going into the fight. Then we watched the fight, and it looked like early on Connor was being aggressive, which is what Connor does. A lot of criticism around Connor is that if the fight goes 5 rounds, he's going to be struggling. Same thing in this fight. He started out aggressive, was landing some great strikes. He was also landing some heavy kicks, and I mean heavy kicks. It was so much so that the announcers were even like, wow, he's really putting a lot into these kicks. Which getting kicks in early like that can really weaken your opponent's legs standing up later rounds. So it's one of those where maybe that's the strategy he was going for. Maybe he was going for, let's pound his legs early. Let's basically survive whatever ground, game that he puts him in once he takes him down. Cause we of course knew that at some point Pereira was going to take him down. And maybe that was the strategy. Now, in this kick that you see right now on the screen, it seemed like in this kick that Conor McGregor caught, basically, Poirier checked the kick, and when he did, it seemed like Conor didn't land this as smoothly as he should have, I guess I'm not the way that you should say that, but didn't land it as well or correctly as you'd hope. But he also put a ridiculous amount of force into these kicks, where missing slightly was not going to be great. Because I've heard people say that with kicks like this, there's a price to pay for the kicker as well as for the person receiving it. So it's one of those where it's an interesting strategy, especially because he has really not come out with that type of strategy before, at least as far as I remember. And then something cracked, essentially, is what Poirier said. It felt like, and there's actually, which Dylan will put on the screen, but there's a photo of Poirier actually pointing to what he believes is the crack, like when it happened. So you see right here, you can see Poirier pointing to it mid-fight after Conor. So this is right after Conor's completed the kick. It hit him in the right leg there. And then Conor's left leg, which is back, is the one that was kicked. And when he put it back, Poirier pointed to it. And everybody mid-fight kind of, stuff like that happens. They're talking in the ring. They're pointing at each other. They're, making gestures. It happens. So nobody really batted an eye. Well, then later, after the result of the fight, which we'll see on screen, that the broken leg at the bottom, and that's what I've heard. It's not a broken ankle. It's a broken leg just above the ankle, is what I've heard. That's
better, right?
Essentially occurred at, I'm sorry?
That's better or worse? Broken ankle, broken leg?
I would assume better, because I feel like breaking a leg is a little, like breaking a leg versus breaking the joint would be better, I would think. But I'm also not sure because I've done neither. So, either way. But essentially, yes. Yeah, so then the break happened later, and people think that was weakened by that fracture. And that fracture happened, or would have happened, probably like a minute and a half into the fight. And then we're talking a full 3.5, 4 minutes later of Conor basically getting pounded on the ground. And by pounded, I mean it looked like Poirier was going to finish him in the round two. If they went to the ground in round two and Conor was still standing up, I don't think Conor's getting off the ground after that. I think he's getting beat in that second round if he goes to the ground early and Poirier continues to just smash him in that ground and pound type of style that he did in the previous fight that ended up winning against Conor. So yeah, so we could say all we want about the merits of that, and I will say it's hard because hindsight 2020, looking at the fight, you want to say that, well, Connor had this fracture and that occurred a minute and a half into the fight, and it obviously took Connor out of his game plan. Obviously you hurt your foot on a kick, you're not going to continue to kick, and your punches and stuff are not going to be the same power, and everything's just thrown off, essentially, is what people are saying. There's merits to that argument, I get it. Poirier did look like, though, he was going to outlast him. He took that barrage early on by Connor in the first round and was doing well. And it was one of those where when he got him to the ground, is the ankle really a factor when he gets him to the ground and he's just pounding him from up top? And Connor tried a guillotine choke. I heard announcers saying bad things about that, or that it was a failed attempt, or he shouldn't have tried it. Whatever. Poirier had gone into him, and that's what Connor opted to do. I mean, whatever. We could talk merits about that game plan and everything there, but essentially, it didn't look good for Connor when he got to the ground, because Poirier did exactly what he did in the previous fight, which is he just pounded him, and he got on top. And Poirier is a black belt in, a couple different jiu-jitsus, and is not somebody to mess with when you get on the ground, and that's what you saw. And so, in my opinion, looking back at the fight, I think overall, even if Connor was healthy, it would have been a steep ask for Connor to win that fight, because he really would have had to land some significant blows in that first round after the supposed fracture, and going into the second round early. Because if he didn't land enough significant blows early in the second round, if Dustin got him to the ground again, I think it would have been over if he got him early. So it's one of those where I do think that overall Dustin Poirier is probably the better fighter. Is it sad to see Connor gone from the level? Yeah. I wish that he would just step away. I wish he would have stepped away a while ago, because I mean, what does the guy do when he's reached the top and won multiple titles and literally is the richest athlete in the world? Like, just retire and enjoy retirement. I get that you want to keep fighting, but it's looking like his prime is past him. And it's one of those where people were criticizing him. Like, I get it. Losing a fight like that after losing 3 of 4 of his last UFC fights, not great. But the thing is he's fighting the top of the top, the best of the best. Dustin Poirier is the best at his weight class right now, or it might be the best at his weight class. So there's merits there too in that argument of, while he's fighting the best of the best, maybe his best days are behind him, but he can still fight at a high level, just not that high of a level. Regardless, the break happened. The stoppage happened at the end of the first round. It was disappointing. We didn't get to see the. I actually kind of feel bad for Poirier, because like I said, I do think Poirier was going to finish him in the second round, especially if he got him to the ground early. And so for Poirier to kind of, not an illegitimate win, because it's not, he won and he was winning when the fight was ended, or was called. It's unfortunate for him because he doesn't get a definitive, if he would have won the definitive trilogy fight, then we would move on and it would be like, okay, Connor's best days are behind him, we can move on. But the whole fracture early and the break, and then I guess apparently, and it's documented, so it's not fake, apparently during Connor's camp in preparation for this, they actually did have where he made a kick and cracked something, and they had x-rays done or something like that, and
Really?
they couldn't find anything definitive on the x-rays, but they believe that it was either like a chip or even potentially like a hairline fracture that they couldn't just see on the x-rays. But like something didn't feel right, I guess, in his camp, and so they were just trying to get healthy enough for him to fight, and so maybe that contributed to it. I don't know. I just, like I said, I feel bad for Dustin Poirier because I feel like he was the better fighter in this fight, but I feel like he's getting robbed because it was such an illegitimate, people are going to argue that it was illegitimate because of the injury, and well, Connor wasn't fighting at his best, and it's like, it would have been a steep ask for Connor to win that fight anyways, and at his best. So I don't know.
Hmm.
That's where I'm at with this fight and everything. I don't know what you think now looking back on it.
So my question is, how long ago was that apparent fracture in the camp? Is this the first I'm hearing of it?
I believe it was a few weeks ago. And Kavanaugh, one of his trainers, basically said it in an interview with a UFC personality. I can't remember what her name is, but it was a good interview, I guess. That's when he mentioned that had occurred, which, like, you can say like, oh, coming out now, that's perfect timing kind of thing. But also, like, they're not going to come out with that before the fight. Like, you're not going to say, like, it's like in hockey where they don't mention that the injury is anywhere specific. Like, they're not going to say, hey, my ankle's bothering me, because then you're going to key on that. So, you know,
Yeah. No, I was kind of curious of like, I mean, not legality of it, but like from the UFC's perspective of having that be a, I don't know, a more likely possibility, I guess. Like, I obviously it seemed like it was checked out and they were comfortable to go through with it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was external pressure to go through with the fight, regardless of his health and everything. So I'm kind of curious about that aspect of it. I'm sure we'll find out more in the future. But yeah, I mean, as we were watching the fight, you remember when we were going through watching it, it was pretty much like, oh, okay, maybe, hey, if he could stay alive for like 40 more seconds or whatever, he can make it out and he'll be fine. And nobody saw the ankle, at least I didn't see the ankle live until we watched the replay, and then he was sitting there and the round was actually over. So it was very much in the moment, and it was it was very sudden. Um, I think we were just thinking he was gonna make it through it, and at least I was saying like at least make it to 2 rounds, or at least make it through like 2 to 3 rounds or whatever. That'd be great. There's more to watch. It seems like the past couple of big fights that have been hyped up, at least the ones that I've seen, and I'm a super casual viewer of it, but the ones that I actually take the time to go and watch, it's always really disappointing because they always seem to end. They always seem to end really early. There's injuries like this. There's just something that basically takes the, I don't know, it takes the drama out of it when, you've been hyping up the whole day around it, months, weeks, whatever it's been advertised as, and then it just kind of ends just like that. So kind of a shame to see it that way. Obviously, everyone thought the same, but just that's just my experience as the casual viewer is that a lot of these fights really just seem like they end in a snap, and I'm sure there's going to be people to be like saying like, oh, okay, let's make it longer. Let's do whatever it takes to make it longer. And, you know, if you're gonna have an outcome that's already predetermined or one you're leaning towards, let's just lean it out or so it's a little bit more entertaining for everybody. But I mean, it was still fun. Like we were talking about the card fights that were beforehand were actually pretty good. Those were kind of fun to see.
yeah.
Uh, so that helped a lot. If everything else was terrible and then this happened, it would have been a really bad night. But still, had a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of the fights were good. It was cool to see Greg Hardy get embarrassed on TV. That was awesome. That was probably worth the price of admission, right on its own.
Thank
So
God, that was crazy too. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's one of those where there's so much hype around it, and it just is disappointing because it just is there's not a definitive end. Like you can't really like. Do I think that Poirier was going to win? Yeah, I do think that Poirier was going to win, but the problem is that the fight ended in a break by Connor. So like, there's questions where it's like, well, Connor ended up, hurting his leg early in that fight, and he didn't continue his strategy of obviously the leg kicks he was landing and the strikes that he was landing. Well, what if he continued doing that? Would Dustin have taken him to the ground as quickly? Would Connor have been better in protecting, that
sure,
way? There's so many what ifs that it kind of sucks because it's like, do I think that Connor maybe deserves another fight against Poirier? Like, no, I don't think he does. But the thing is you can make an argument that he should because of the way that this one ended. Like, in my opinion, I think, for McGregor to get another title fight, he's gonna have to win a couple fights. Like, he's gonna have to beat. Like, he should not get a Poirier fight immediately. He should get a couple fights underneath Poirier where he builds his way up to maybe Poirier, where Poirier can get a title shot first. And then, he builds his way up to that. That's fine. If he gets there again based on that route, I'm okay with it and I'll be excited because obviously it means that Connor's back on the grind and, we're going to get a legitimate fight. But the problem is that, with the Hail Mary attempts that Connor's trying to throw right now on Twitter and all this, it's one of those where you're just like, he obviously is trying to get a fourth fight, but like I don't think he deserves it. But also, it's the UFC and it's Conor McGregor, and he makes a lot of money for everybody involved. So, like, he might just get the fight offhand, like automatically.
So that's, I mean, that's an interesting discussion too. I think I know what the answer is right off the bat, but do you think they'd make more money if, from the UFC's perspective and everyone else involved, if they went straight to the fourth fight, or if they milked out all these other, your comeuppance victories and stuff of him fighting lower level fighters? Now, given there are more fights, there's more things to hype up. Obviously, they're at a lower level. I'd be interested to find out if his superstardom is enough to like overcome, you know, lesser fighters or people that they're actually making up. That would be very interesting, because that would mean he's such a strong media draw that they don't even have to do this massive fourth fight, and they will, like, assuming he wins through them. It's a gamble for sure. But if he's actually able to make more money fighting these lower level fighters, because people don't care about the level, they're casuals like me who are like, oh, I know that person, I might as well watch it because everyone else is going to be talking about it. And that's an interesting discussion for lots of other sports, but this is a really good example of where that could come into play. Maybe. I'm sure we'll see.
So a couple things here. So one, I think there's two options that are pretty viable. I think your short-term make money now option is to get the fourth fight. I would assume Poirier is able to get a title fight next. He should get a title fight next. I don't know if he's going to, but he should. And then at that point, you can advertise it as McGregor versus the champion and Poirier. And then you could throw all the advertising out there about the definitive fight, and like, well, the last one ended in abruptly and short. This one will be the definitive answer. There's advertising there that can be done.
Yeah.
And I think you have short-term gains there. I think if you're going for the long-term gains, as well as the safer route, I think you give Poirier the title fight, and I think you give McGregor a couple tune-up fights, not tune-up, but against lower-ranked opponents than Poirier, and build his way up there. Because I think if he ends up winning, I don't know the rankings right now, but offhand, but let's say he goes and wins against the 5th-ranked fighter or the 6th-ranked fighter, and then he wins against the 3rd-ranked fighter. If he wins 2 in a row, then you go, in depending on how he wins those 2, you go, okay, the old Conor's back. He's on the up. He's earned he's earned the right to get, another chance. And then maybe you give him, I don't know if they'd give him 3 fights before they made him go to Poirier, but I guess it's based on if Poirier wins the title fight. There's a lot that could happen there, but I think that's the safer route for UFC, because I think that they would allow McGregor to build again. And I think he would probably win against lesser opponents, because he can still fight at a high level. It just might not be at the highest. But if you give him a couple fights below to build his way back up, and earn the right to get to a title fight, or even just a fight against Poirier if Poirier doesn't hold the title, then you feel a lot better about going into that 4th fight, because you go, okay, it wasn't handed to him in just a, it's the UFC, we're going to make money on its instant 4th fight. It was more of like we're building it up, we're allowing Conor to get back there. There's a path for him to get there. That's the safer route. I think that's long-term money, because you can sell, because once he wins 1 or 2 of those fights, you can sell the next 2 or 3 of his fights.
Yeah.
Building up to the to the championship fight, or like I said, a 4th bout against Poirier. So there's, like I said, I have a feeling that unfortunately what's going to happen is that UFC is going to give Poirier a title fight. If whether he wins or loses, I think if he loses, you're going to see McGregor Poirier 4 ready to go next year, same time. I think if Poirier does get a title fight and wins, I think then there's an argument that he shouldn't fight McGregor next. Like, Conor shouldn't get a title shot next. So that's where I would stand with that. I don't, it's hard. They're definitely, UFC is definitely in a hard place, because there's going to be a lot of Conor fans that are going to want him to fight immediately against Poirier again. Obviously citing the illegitimacy of his injury and all that and fun stuff. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what the UFC should do to hold up the sport is they should have Poirier get a title fight, and then in the meantime give a couple tune-up fights where Conor has a path to get back to the top, rather than just handing him the best fight available.
I think we can both agree that as long as he doesn't want to be done, he is not going to be done.
No.
If he
Yeah.
wants to fight, he will have the platform. Absolutely. There's
Listen, he's the
literally no
richest athlete in the
downside.
world.
Yeah.
He's the richest athlete in the world. He just sold his whiskey for 600 million. He can do what he wants when he wants, and he could just kick back and relax the rest of his life. But if he wants to genuinely get back in the gym and fight, then he'll keep doing it. I just, like I said, I don't know if he can earn his way back to the level of fighting that he was at before. Otherwise, I think, the end of his peak is here, and the end of his career is here. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard because it's like I feel like the UFC is going to try to milk it for all they can,
Oh yeah.
but I just hope that they handle it the right way.
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel the
So
same way. I feel that they're not going to let go of what they know that they have, and that's a bunch of people who aren't or who were mostly introduced to the sport by him or as proxy by him in some way. And they absolutely have to milk that in some way. So be interesting to see the upcoming weeks. I'm sure we'll get injury updates and everything and what they're going to be looking at, and you'll hear a little bit more. But obviously, that's going to be the biggest news story to follow with it. So
yep.